Good evening, Rockdale County citizens, business owners, members of the local clergy, and other interested parties. Today is Thursday, February 17th, 2022, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the second virtual public information session regarding a public facilities authority being proposed by the Rockdale County Board of Commissioners. My name is Jamie Cabe, and it's my privilege to serve as the Chief of Staff for the Rockdale County Board of Commissioners. I will also serve as the presider of this public information session tonight. We are honored to have many professionals available during tonight's information session that will lead the presentation. After the presentation has concluded, I will offer an opportunity for public comment to those that have pre-registered for tonight's session. At the conclusion of the public comment, I will offer an opportunity for closing remarks by our Finance Department CFO and financial advisors prior to ending the session. As a reminder to those that may not have had an opportunity to register for tonight's public comment, you still have one other opportunity to provide public comment regarding this topic, which will be on Saturday, February 19th at 10 o'clock a.m. For guidance on how to register for public comment for February 19th, please refer to Rockdale County's social media accounts, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you do not have access to social media, please contact our Public Relations Department at 770-278-7009. Again, 770-278-7009. Citizens are also reminded that they may submit questions about the Public Facilities Authority in advance by emailing publicrelations@rockdalecountyga.gov. Again, that's publicrelations@rockdalecountyga.gov. I'll now take a moment to introduce the members of our team that will present information to you tonight. First and foremost, we have our Executive Director, Mark Lewis, from the Rockdale County Finance Department. Next, Executive Director Jennifer Rutledge from the Rockdale County Legislative Affairs Department. Executive Director Sue Sanders from the Rockdale County General Services Department. Attorney Roger Murray from Murray Barnes Finister LLP. Mr. David Corbin, Financial Advisor from Terminus Municipal Advisors, and Mr. Mac Underwood, Financial Advisor from Terminus Municipal Advisors. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. David Corbin. Mr. Corbin. It appears that Mr. Corbin is not yet on the presentation. Mr. Underwood, would you please take over?
Yes, thank you, GK, for allowing us to speak and participate in this presentation. David will be joining us in just a few minutes. First of all, I'd like to say to everybody listening in that we are going to cover a few things for you today, which includes the need for the renovations at the courthouse. What is a PFA? We also talked about how the PFA is beneficial to the county. So we want to start off with talking about the need, and we will ask Sue Sanders to address that item.
Good evening. Thank you, Mac, and welcome to everyone. So my name is Sue Sanders, and I'm the Executive Director of General Services. My department encompasses FLOST, capital projects, facility and vehicle acquisition, and all maintenance. For 14 of my 20 years with the county, I have been responsible for facility maintenance of the government complex and the courthouse. I have specifically been working on the courthouse and government complex expansion since 2017. The number one need and goal for the Public Facility Authority is the courthouse and government complex. That is the top priority of the board and of this PFA. The last courthouse expansion was done in the mid-70s when the population of Rockdale County was less than 30,000. In 2017, when this board took office, all of the courthouse officials voiced their concerns regarding the need for a new facility and space. They also did the same during public meetings last year for our 5-year capital improvement planning process. And what you're seeing on the video is actually a tour of the courthouse while I'm speaking, just so for reference. We do have a lot of issues over there. Some examples to give you an idea, we have 3 assistant district attorneys sharing one office with no privacy to meet with their clients individually and confidentially. We've converted closets and vaults into offices. We also have many security issues in the facility. We currently are renting space for multiple government offices, but specifically for the court's public defender's office and also the DUI lab. In addition, we did build a facility offsite for vital record storage that is already full. And last but certainly not least, our new state court judge, he was appointed earlier, actually in January. He'll be holding court in an offsite community meeting room with jury deliberation taking place in the storage room behind the stage there. So all departments that will be involved in the state court will have to travel from the courthouse to the JP Carr Community Center, and the sheriff will have to secure a facility that is not set up for court. The county did purchase a temporary home for probate and magistrate courts, and when they moved in, they were already out of space after it was renovated. So space is one of the issues among many, including the ADA issues, security, and just the condition of the facilities in general. We also have structural issue in our administration facility, which has metal beams installed throughout the facility. And those beams are in, as you can see, office space, and they are also in public spaces. So they are there to prevent any further deterioration. We do have an estimate of $2 million for the repairs and relocation. We would actually have to relocate all of the offices in that facility for at least 6 months. So as I wrap up, and Mac, if you have any questions, I can clarify anything. But basically, the Board of Commissioners is tasked with providing the space for the departments. They're also responsible for providing the capital budget for any needs for elected officials and department heads. We're at a critical point right now, and we're also with the safety foremost, but space, confidentiality, all the things I discussed. But that is the main benefit of the PFA for the county, in that it allows the county to quickly address capital needs. In the fact, if there was a major need at one time, that we could quickly address it and go through the financial process with the PFA.
Thank you, Sue. I'd like to make a few comments at this time about the need. I participated in the walkthrough with other county officials in the senator's office back in October and November. And what you see at the courthouse is probably 3 people in every room trying to conduct investigation on court cases or on DA matters for the juvenile court. And that's just kind of, that's unacceptable really in this day and age. So the courthouse is overcrowded. I think the other thing I'll add is that during the capital budget hearings last year, each elected official in the courthouse and each person working over there that presented clearly indicated that the top priority was more space and renovation of the courthouse. Also, as you look at these beams in the administration building, those beams are not in the center of rooms. It's close to walls where walls are currently there and should be bearing the weight of all of the construction. I just think there's a lot of beams in those areas that show that the renovations are much needed. Other thing I'll say is that if you walk around the finance department, you'll see that most of the file cabinets have wood or something in the front of it to help hold up the file cabinets. So that shows the need for the renovation of the facilities. Now we are going to turn our attention to what is a PFA and the benefits of a PFA. And I'll ask Roger Murray to address that issue.
Thank you, Mac. My name is Roger Murray. I'm a public finance attorney, and I've been practicing in the area of public finance my entire career, 32 years. And have been working with the county almost that entire time. and I'm the one that drafted the legislation to create the PFA. A public facilities authority is a quasi-governmental entity that's created by the General Assembly to assist local governments financing capital projects. And I just want everybody to understand that this PFA is not unique to Rockdale County. There's a number of these throughout the states. In fact, we did a quick search and came up with 72. And that's not an exhaustive search, but that was a quick search that we did, came up with 72 public facilities authorities or public building authorities that have been created throughout the state. So I just want to underscore that this isn't, Rockdale County trying something and doing something that hasn't been done many times before. How does the PFA work? Basically, the way it works is public facilities authorities issues revenue bonds, and it takes the proceeds and remits those to the county, and the county uses them to fund its capital projects. And then the Public Facilities Authority and the county entered into an intergovernmental contract pursuant to which the county agrees to pay the authority amounts sufficient to retire the debt. So the authority's sole source of revenue is money that it receives from the county. The authority does not have the ability and will not have the ability to levy any sort of tax. The only source of repayment for the bonds will be monies coming from the county. PFAs provide a number of benefits. The main benefits are the low cost of capital. The county is able to borrow money at the lowest possible borrowing interest rates. The closing costs are lower than other types of financings, and they can respond fairly quickly. A PFA bond issue can be done fairly quickly, obviously with plenty of transparency, which I'll discuss in a minute, and jumping through all the hoops to make sure all the protocols have been met. But it can be done fairly quickly. And to me, the largest advantage of PFA financing is that it spreads the cost of the facilities out over the useful life of the facilities. Otherwise, people that are living in Rockdale County today and paying taxes today are paying the entire cost of the facility, but yet that facility is going to last for 40, 50, 60, maybe more years. So if you finance it through long-term debt issuance with the Public Finance Authority, those costs are spread out, for whatever period of time, 20, 30, 40 years. And I wanted to touch just a minute on transparency and underscore the fact that both a PFA and the county are subject to open meetings and open records laws. No financings can be done without the approval of both the authority and the county in public meetings, and those meetings obviously are noticed. The law creating the Public Facilities Authority will require that a public hearing be held by the PFA prior to the issuance of the bonds. And as one of the participants last night pointed out, the current draft of the legislation does not contain that provision. That's something that I will be adding after we have the last public hearing. Also, bonds issued by the Public Facilities Authority have to be validated by the Superior Court. And in a validation proceeding, we basically tell the court what we're doing. The court looks at everything and says that we've done it in accordance with law. And a notice of that hearing is published once a week in each of the 2 weeks prior to the hearing. So there's plenty of opportunities all the way along the process for citizens to be involved and informed of what's being financed. Mac, that's all I had on what a Public Facility Authority is, kind of how it works, and the transparency.
Okay. I also want to point out on the bond issues that when a bond issue is done, all of the proceeds, well, let me back up. When a bond issue is done, there is an independent trustee, what we call a bond trustee, that is appointed to make sure that all of the expenditures are in accordance with the bond documents. So we appoint an independent financial trustee. That person, that bank or local entity receives all of the proceeds from the bond issue. And during the course of expending the funds, the county will have to submit requisitions to draw down and expend the bond proceeds. And really, the trustee certifies that all of the funds are spent in accordance with the capital project list and in accordance with the bond documents. I think that is one of the reasons that you will see in the draft document that there is no need to audit the bond proceeds because you have an independent bond trustee that is set up to handle that on behalf of the county, and they will not expend any expenditures or funds without proper documentation. So that's why we included in this document that there will be no audit of the bond proceeds. Now, as it relates to the audit of the PFA, the PFA will be a component unit of Rockdale County. The PFA's financials will be audited on an annual basis and the results presented in the county's audit. Therefore, you will have the bond proceeds audited, well, under the auspices of the trustee, and then the transaction during the bond will be, covered in the financial audit for the county. So we will not waive the audit of the PFA. We will not waive the PFA's audit. It will have to be audited on a regular basis and everything included in the county's financial statements.
Yeah,
as
Mac,
it relates to financial.
On that point, Mac, I was just gonna point out that, the waiver of that, I was the one that recommended that the county do that. Again, I've been doing this for 32 years. I think there was one case where it wasn't waived, but that's really to protect. That's really to not expend taxpayer monies on an unnecessary audit. That's why I recommended that. Because as you pointed out, there's plenty of safeguards in place to ensure that the bond proceeds are spent, as intended. The audit, the bond trustee, and everything else. It's really just a matter of saving the taxpayer money. That's why I recommended that.
So we'll move on and talk a little bit about financial management. The county does have financial management policies that are in place. What we will need to add is a debt policy, which will require financial disclosures and annual overviews of the county's finances. Now, the county already has to submit its financial statements to Emma to verify that all of the bond transactions are handled appropriately. I think it's important to note that the county has been fiscally conservative based on its operations. You'll see there that the county is rated A2 from Moody's rating agencies. We've also had the general fund bonds rated. We've had stormwater bonds rated and water and sewer bonds rated. The county does have a minimal, it has a fund balance policy as a part of its financial management plan. And that minimum fund balance requirement is 35% of gross revenues. And what we did is we looked at 2020 and 2021. The county had a fund balance of about $35 million. And the required amount in there for 2020 would have been about $27 million. And the required amount for 2021 would have been right at $29 million. This shows that the county has been conservative on all of its financial modeling and financial operations. And that's why the county really has a good bond rating. When we do a bond issue to fund different projects, we look at a 5-year historical trend on revenues, and then we forecast 5 years forward to make sure that the county can afford to pay the bond indebtedness. And as you see here on this page, the debt service budget ratio is 1.7%, which is well below most municipalities within the state. And I guess the bottom line here is the county has pledged not to issue debt it cannot afford. So we will look at the actual revenue coming in and make sure that the revenue can support the additional debt.
And Mac, I want to point out one thing too, is when the rating agencies look at the county and provide that rating, they're looking at the county's financial management system, policies, practices, they go through the county's finances with a fine tooth comb, and they done that on several occasions and still come up with the investment grade rating, very, very high rating, AA. So
Yes. And AA is really right below AAA. So that means the county has managed its financials real well over the past years. This slide here really shows the county's debt profile, and the 10-year long-term debt issuance history really shows that the county has only done one issue in the last 10 years that is not related to revenue bonds for stormwater, water and sewer issues. Even in doing those transactions, we verified that the county has sufficient revenue to pay those debt bond issues back. And that's part of the process that we'll go through on any bond issue. I think it's important to note that this is totally separate from any SPLOST revenue. This has only to do with the funding of the courthouse and any bonds issued by the PFA. With that, we'll move on to the next slide. We've talked about the county implementing a debt limit. And what we mean there is we would recommend that the county not issue any debt in excess of 10% of its annual operating revenue. So if the county's revenue is $80 million, they could not issue any debt that would cost more than $8 million a year to finance. And again, the debt issuance, we show that the county is AA rated. And on any bond issues the county does, we would recommend that it be at least A rated or higher. If not, we would probably look for insurance to raise that rate to that level. And again, I think the county has managed its operations, very well in the past. I would say this also, that in participating in the county's budget hearing, both operating and capital, one of the first things we do is we look at the amount of revenue that the county is generating. The commission always listens to us and staff about not going over the estimated revenue amount. So what we would say is that there is revenue, it's a balanced budget. Revenue does not exceed, expenses do not exceed revenue. And if it is, it's only a small amount. So I think overall, what we're trying to convey to everybody is that the PFA is just another tool for the county to be able to fund capital projects as it needs. There are immediate needs that the county has with the courthouse and with the administration building. I think the other point we left out on the administration building, if we have to do those renovations, basically everybody would have to be moved out and that facility almost gutted to repair those structural issues in the administration building. Jamie or Sue or Roger, do y'all think we left out anything else we need to cover?
Yeah, I think we need to cover, I'm sorry to jump over you, Jamie. I think we need to cover how we expect to repay the bonds.
Okay.
Hey, this is David, and I apologize for the delay. Before we kind of get to that, let me, if I can say a few words here. I think, again, by way of context, I think we've tried to establish really two things here. One is there's clearly a critical need for maintenance to be done and upgrades and improvements to the capital facilities. It's a long time coming. The analysis has been done, the studies have been done, and there's clearly a need for it. Many of these things have not been, they've been maintained well. That's why we're here today, but we've had citizens, the growth in the number of citizens in the county has exploded over the last 10 to 15 years. So we've really tried to break this up for those that are listening into really two parts. There's the need side of this, and then there's the PFA as a tool. And I apologize if I'm repeating some of this, but by way of context, the tool is a commonly used tool throughout Georgia that we've tried to, that we're trying to implement and execute. But we also realize that we need to do it with respect to a certain level of transparency and a certain level of accountability from a financial perspective. And I think what you heard today were a lot of details from both Roger and Mac and the entire administration. One, again about the needs, and two, about this wonderful tool that's been made available, that can be made available by the legislature to allow us to execute this capital program in a timely fashion, but it no way takes away from the fact that the county in and of itself has to provide a transparent process with public input, and there are protocols in place. And even the bigger picture is, how do we make sure we do this in a responsible financial matter going forward? How do we make sure that the county doesn't, the county can only borrow what it affords? The market will dictate much of that, but we believe we've set up all the protocols and enhancements necessarily to codify what that looks like. And it matches where the county's been financially. I know there's been a lot of talk about, some mismanagement in the past in terms of financials. We've had clean audits for a number of years. We have had solid credit ratings. I think, Mac, you noted that debt service as a percentage of the entire budget is about 1.7%. There's been very little issuance over a period of time in terms of using debt to fund capital and maintenance. They have funded most of those things out of their operating budget. Now, are there some things that need to be put in place as we go forward with this new tool and as the county is growing? I think Director Lewis is on the line. I think Mac and I have all worked collectively with the staff to fill in those gaps and fill in those holes as we move forward. And hopefully through this presentation and some of these questions that we've received, we can answer some of those tonight. So I just wanted to give a little bit more context and reiterate the bigger picture about sort of how we've segregated this presentation and how we're looking at what needs to get done. So is Director Lewis on by chance?
Well, David, I'm sorry, can I kind of address the issue Roger brought up before you started? Basically, we would be looking for the increase in the digest or increase in assessed value to fund a lot of the debt service on capital projects. So the PFA would, the county increased values and assessed values on property, which is the digest, basically will provide a lot of the funding to pay the debt service. And also we will look to consolidate some of the leases and some of the other items where we can bring people back together in one facility rather than having to rent out space, pay additional electrical cost and operating cost. All of that would go toward funding the PFA debt service. So I think you want to go back to Mark now, or Jamie Warner.
I'm sorry to step in, Chief Cabe. I was wondering if Mark was on the phone. I mean, Mark's been in the trenches with us for a little over a year now. And I think, many probably like to, make sure that some of the things that we're talking about are consistent with what he's been doing and the great work he's been doing for the last year in terms of filling some of those holes and the overall support and need to kind of use this tool to get us where we need to get to. Mark, are you on? Yeah, great.
Absolutely. Yes, I am on. Mark Lewis, Finance Director here at Rockdale County. And yes, we have been doing a lot of work to strengthen up the policies that we already have in place. Mac mentioned specifically about the fund balance and where we keep our fund balance out in relation to our debt. But there's a number of other policies that we're going to be strengthening up over the next 6 months. And thankful that we have the assistance of outside consultants to help us strengthen those policies.
Great. Chief Cabe, we'll turn that back over to you.
Okay. Mr. Murray, did you have additional points that you wanted to make, or did Terminus adequately handle the points that you were referencing?
No, that was it. Just the source of repayment on the bonds. Mac covered that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to the members of our team for the very detailed information that you've provided during tonight's presentation. I'll now move into the public comment portion of tonight's presentation, tonight's session. Please note, for the purposes of this session, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Comments should be relative to the topic of a public facilities authority and the information presented during this session. Speakers are asked to conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. The use of abusive or profane language shall not be allowed. No debate or argument between speakers or presenters shall be permitted. The first speaker that has registered for tonight is Mr. Kurt Jacoy. Mr. Jacoy?
It doesn't seem as if he made it to the session tonight and is logged in. Chief Cape.
Thank you, Director Gum. I'll also call his name at the end of public comment just to make sure, just in case he's fallen behind tonight. Next on the list to speak tonight is Ms. Corliss Turner. Ms. Turner, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I've listened to the meeting last night as well as tonight, and I hear the things that you're pointing out, but I had to get the resolution and read it for myself. One thing I want to point out here is the statement from the top that the Board of Commissioners have determined that the creation of a public facilities authority would be in the best interest of the residents of the county. How would they know what's in the best interest of us if they did not include us in these public hearings until they presented it to the legislators? The legislators asked if there had been a public hearing. The answer was no, and now here we are with this meeting. Also, I notice here that the authority shall consist of 3 members appointed by the Board of Commissioners. The 3 members may be appointed as members of the authority. They may appoint themselves, and then when their term is up, they may reappoint themselves to exceed him or herself. That tells me if one of the commissioners was defeated in an election, they would still be on this board. This sounds like a lifetime position here. Still no participation or involvement with the taxpayers. That's not even being considered. The other thing is to pay the costs. You mentioned several things like the proceeds of revenue bonds, notes, or other forms of obligations. Rather than to read it all, at the end it says, or from any other source whatsoever. That tells me there's no direction. And I know last night you all mentioned about the value of the houses gonna be going up this year. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you're talking about the taxpayers, but you have no direction as to how you're gonna pay this debt back. And then another thing here is that, let's see, what is this under? Give me a moment, please. Here, this statement, to do all things necessary or convenient to carry out the powers expressly given in this act. And then there's another statement here that says, this act shall become effective as of the date on which it is signed by the governor of Georgia, or as of the date on which it becomes law without the approval of the governor. So sounds like that you want to X out the citizens or the taxpayers, the governors as well, the governor as well, and pay back this any means necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Turner, for your comments. Mr. Murray or our financial advisors or Director Lewis, any comments based on Ms. Turner's comments?
Yes, I'll take a stab at it because it's really, I think, legal questions relating to the drafting of the legislation. I guess the first thing she referred to is the recital in the resolution, where we state that the Board of Commissioners is basically seeking to create the PFA in the interest of the citizens. And the Board of Commissioners whether or not you agree with their decisions, that's the lens they always look through. You know, they're making the decisions that they think that would benefit the citizens in each and every case. So that's, you know, we said it again here. They wouldn't be moving forward with it if they didn't think it would benefit the citizens. You're correct, Ms. Turner, that the way it's currently drafted, they have the option of either appointing independent members or they can appoint themselves as members. If they're appointed as members and they lose, they're not reelected, then they are no longer a member of the authority. So their term of office is supposed to be the same, coterminous, I guess, if you will. The language that you're referring to there, the revenue bonds are payable from whatever source. That's true, that revenue bonds in all acts creating authorities, there's that same language, and it's just to enable the issuer to use whatever sources that it has to repay the bonds. In this particular instance, the authority doesn't have any revenues, will not have any revenues other than the revenues that are going to be derived from the county, from contract payments from the county. So I'm going to underscore, I think the most important thing here is the authority does not have the power to levy taxes. The authority's only source of revenue is going to be monies it receives from the county, and the monies it receives from the county are going to be from the general fund, and it's going to be, general fund monies essentially. And the effective date language you referred to, that's true on all legislation of this nature. What happens is if the governor doesn't sign it for 60 days, then it becomes effective by operation of law. That's just the law in Georgia that applies to everything. It's not unique to this particular act. So I hope I've at least provided some clarity to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I appreciate that. Moving on to the next speaker that has registered for public comment tonight is Mr. John Bowers. Mr. Bowers, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please.
Yes.
Proceed.
Chief McCabe, I do have about 3 questions before I start my comments.
Okay, you have a total of 3 minutes, so please proceed as you wish.
Okay, just one question is that the PFA is not limited to just issuing revenue bonds for the courthouse and administration, correct?
If you'll go ahead with all 3 of your questions, we'll address them at the end.
Okay. And from what I heard, property taxes based on home valuations will be the primary source of debt service. And then would one of the guys please, for the audience, describe self-liquidating?
Okay. Before you get into your comments, we'll go ahead and address your questions. Mr. Murray and or our financial advisors.
Okay, I'll take the first one. The way it's drafted, it is not limited to the courthouse. That's correct. It's intended to be so the county could use it for future capital projects. In terms of the source of security or the source of repayment, I'll let the terminus folks deal with that. And could you repeat the third question again?
I think it was self-liquidating. You wanted a definition.
Self-liquidating, yeah. So a revenue bond, the concept in Georgia is a revenue bond has to be self-liquidating. It means that you have to pledge a specific source of revenue stream to the repayment of that revenue bond. And if it's water and sewer, for example, it could be water and sewer revenues. In this particular instance, it would be revenues derived by the authority from the intergovernmental contract. So revenue bonds have to be self-liquidating in the sense we have to identify a repayment stream, a specific repayment stream for those revenue bonds. And in this instance, it would be the intergovernmental contract with the county. And then David will talk about, or Mac will talk about the source of those contract payments.
Yeah, no, those contract payments, to piggyback off of what Mr. Murray just stated, those contract payments represent payments that will be derived from the county's general fund. Now, by nature, the county's general fund includes property taxes. It includes a number of fees that come in, 80 million a year roughly of property taxes and other related fees. So again, part of what debt service will be paid from the general fund. I think it's the county's intent to limit the use of additional millage when possible to pay for these projects. We've got some offset that we talked about, which are consolidation of leases, lower maintenance expenses because we're not investing money into older buildings. All of that has to be taken into consideration to net out whether the general fund can afford or not afford. All of the commissioners and the administration have made a commitment that before specific property taxes are levied for all of these projects, for any project, the goal is to basically take it through a budget process and make sure there's sufficient coverage there and sufficient accountability to pay the debt service out of the general fund. Doesn't necessarily mean it's just a millage rate increase, but we do anticipate in future years that property valuations will increase, which will provide additional revenue to the general fund overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Also, thank you, Mr. Murray. Mr. Bowers, I believe you had some additional time left. You had some additional comments that you'd like to make?
Yes, Chief McCabe, thank you. I guess, I've been living in this county for more than 20 years. And as indicated by a previous commenter, this Board of Commissioners has had a series of transparency challenges since it's been in place. I'm going to suggest some changes for consideration to the draft legislation, that the PFA consists of 5 members, not 3, and that no sitting member of the BOC is allowed to appoint themselves or another BOC member. Of the 5 members, suggests that no more than 2 have demonstrated professional experience in finance, and the remaining members be citizens at large and be independent of any political party affiliation. Those members must be a county resident for not less than 5 years. 3 members would constitute a quorum. And then the last comment I have is that this information presented seems to be inclusive as to the pros of a PFA, but excludes the cons of a PFA. Further, PFAs being one of among several tools for counties to fund projects is silent on comparing the pros and cons of PFAs to other tools available such as SPLOSTs and bonds. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bowers. Next on the list of those that have registered to speak for tonight is Ms. Charlotte Gellert. Ms. Gellert.
Thank you, Chief Cabe. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again tonight. If someone could explain in the proposed legislation 4B, the condemnation powers of the PFA. And it sounds like the PFA could be creating another county department. In the makeup of the board, there's no limit on the number of terms presented. In looking at the authorities that are already in Rockdale County, there's a hospital authority with 7 members. There's a economic development, shucks, I lost my notes. Economic Development Authority with more than 3 members. There's a Conyers Housing Authority with more than 3 members. In surrounding counties, the ones that I looked up, Peachtree City, Stockbridge, McDonough, Newton County, they all have more than 3 board members on the PFA. If the debt level is now 1%, 1.7, about 1.7% of the maximum 10%, why does the Board of Commissioners want to put the county in further debt for up to 40 years? What is the difference between a PFA and the Rockdale Development Authority? They both can issue bonds as one of the things. By having the only revenue of property taxes, will this bond repayment show as a separate line item on a person's property tax bill? Are there other projects that the PFA is considering? I think Mr. Bowers maybe touched on that a little bit. What if the PFA builds a courthouse, then leases it back to the county to gain revenue to repay the bonds with the rents that it collects from basically itself? Is that a possibility? Is that something that happens? The PFA builds something and then leases it back to the county. So then the county is having to pay the principal and the interest and the rents. If the courthouse is a priority, and it sounds like it is based on the need, and many people believe that, yes, a courthouse is needed. If it's a priority, why hasn't other means of financing been addressed before now? And what is the use of the previous probate court space and the previous magistrate court building? Thank you.
Ms. Keller, thank you very much for your very detailed questions. I think what I would like to request of you, if you would please, I believe you have my email address. If you would, I did my best to try to type as you were speaking, but I think at about question 8, I lost. I want to make sure that I have all the wording proper. So if you would, could you send me an email of all of those questions? And during our next public information session, I will certainly make sure that you have answers to all of those questions. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Thank you, Chief Cabe. I would like the public to be able to hear the answers to some of these questions. And it may not be convenient for them to tune in on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock.
Okay, well, we'll do our best to address some of the concerns that you have. Mr. Murray, would you like to start?
Yeah, I too was trying to take notes as quickly as I could. So I think first and foremost, I want to point out that development authorities cannot do governmental projects. That's a great analogy. This is kind of like a development authority, right? Development authorities assist with private projects, and public facilities authorities assist with public projects. So there's a specific Supreme Court case that says development authorities cannot do public projects. You talked about sort of double dipping. If it was leased, would they have to pay rent and bond payments both? The answer to that is no. Basically, any contract entered into between the authority and the county are going to be solely, they will solely require that the county pay debt service on the bonds. That's it. The county is never going to enter into a lease or an intergovernmental contract with the authority where it's going to pay the authority extra money. You asked if it was going to be a separate item on a tax bill. The answer to that would be no. It's just going to be an expenditure within the general fund and not a separate line item. You mentioned the number of members. You're right. Public facilities authorities have 3, 5. I don't recall creating any or seeing any that have 7. But yes, there are many that have 5 members. Jamie, do you have any others?
Another county department was another question. Was this going to become, I think Chief Caben maybe can answer that, whether this is going to become.
And Ms. Keller, there's been no discussion among our board to create another county department as it relates to the Public Facilities Authority. Also, either Roger and or David, I believe one of our Ms. Keller's first questions was about condemnation powers of the PFA.
Yeah, it has condemnation powers. Again, most PFAs have condemnation powers. I have yet to see a PFA exercise the condemnation powers, again, because they're financing projects for counties or cities that have their own condemnation powers. It does help if you give the Public Facilities Authority the power of condemnation. It helps a little bit on the tax analysis to ensure that the bonds are exempt from federal taxes. But yes, there's a provision in the act right now that grants the authority the power to condemn property.
Okay, thank
Roger.
you. And go ahead.
So Roger, could you address, I think the other one was board terms?
Oh, I don't have the act in front of me, but it should say that they're 3-year terms, right? They're staggered 3-year terms. So if they appoint members that aren't BOC members, if they're independent members, I believe it says that they're 3-year terms, and you have staggered 3-year terms.
So in this situation, the board has already made clear, and also in the call that we had last week, or I'm sorry, yesterday, that is, the number of members that are on the actual authority, that is subject to change. I mean, currently right now, the legislation is written as 3, but the board has expressed interest in that number changing based on essentially what the public wants. So that could potentially change before this eventually becomes law, if it does. Ms. Gellert, I believe that we hit all of the questions. And if we did not, then please feel free to shoot me an email, and I will make sure that we get any unanswered questions addressed, either via email to you or also during the next session as well. I'd like to, I'm sorry, Director Sanders.
Sorry to interrupt. She did ask one question about the previous probate court space.
That's right.
In the courthouse. That has been renovated for offices for the new state court judge, and the magistrate facility is currently empty. It would require, if we were to reuse it, substantial repairs and renovations, which is why we moved the magistrate court out. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thanks.
that. Okay. Before we close public comment, I'd like to give Mr. Kurt Jacoy another opportunity. Director Gum, do you see where he has logged on?
I do not. He has not entered this evening.
Chief Cave, you're on mute.
Thank you. I apologize. Public comment portion is now closed. I now give an opportunity for our finance advisors and also our executive director of finance department an opportunity to make any closing statements. Director Lewis.
Thank you, Chief Cave. I just wanted to say, for all of the reasons that have been stated here, that I am absolutely in support of the county forming a PFA. There is a critical need, and the PFA serves as a vehicle to get us there that will have the least financial impact on the citizens of Rockdale County. Let me also say that there are a number of financial policies that are in place, and over the next 6 months, we're going to continue to look at those and strengthen those in several areas, and in some cases that work has already begun. I was trying to say that in previous conversations with citizens, but I didn't articulate it as well as I should have. I also want to point out that we've consulted outside the county to arrive at the best possible solution for Rockdale County and its citizens. Thank you, Chief Cave.
Thank you, Executive Director Lewis. Mr. Underwood or Mr. Corbin, any final comments from our financial advisor?
Well, I'd just like to say from my perspective that I think we've demonstrated the need both at the courthouse and at the administration building. The courthouse is really and truly just overcrowded. And again, during the budget hearings last year, all of the elected officials in the courthouse indicated that they need additional space to be able to do their function properly. And the beams and stuff in the administration building speaks for itself. So the county does have a pressing need to get all these things done.
Corbett?
I think it's been pretty well said tonight. So no additional comments, Chief. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Executive Director Rutledge from Legislative Affairs, closing comments.
I don't have anything else to add. I will just say very quickly that just to give a quick update to everyone that might be listening, that as far as this legislation is concerned, the Board of Commissioners passed a resolution with an exhibit attached to it that is the legislation that we're requesting from our state delegation that Roger Murray, our bond counsel, has been talking about tonight. As it stands right now, we are in the public hearing process of that legislation, and it has not been signed on with the sponsor from any of our delegation members until we conclude these portions. So when we use the term legislation, we are talking about what was before the Board of Commissioners, and that has been adopted via resolution. The legislation that has been requested from our delegation has not been adopted and is subject to change, like we've talked about a little bit with the members and things like that. But I just wanted to make that clarification, and that's all I wanted to add.
Executive Director Sanders, closing comments from General Services.
Just again, would like to say, we are out of space and we are at a critical point for the county. So even if we repair the structural issues in the administration building and renovate the existing courthouse, we are still out of space and putting, just investing money into old facilities. That is all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Rockdale County Board of Commissioners, I'd like to thank the citizens, the business owners, members of our clergy, and other interested parties for taking the time to participate in this virtual information session. Please remember, for guidance on how to register for public comment for the third and final public information session, please refer to Rockdale County's social media accounts. If you don't have access to social media, please contact Public Relations Department at 770-278-7009. Citizens are also reminded that they may submit questions about how the Public Facilities Authority operates in advance of Saturday's session by emailing publicrelations@rockdalecountyga.gov. Again, publicrelations@rockdalecountyga.gov. I can't stress the importance of that. If you email your questions in advance, it gives an opportunity for the professionals on this call to make sure that you have a proper response, very detailed response to your questions, and those will be presented in the next public session. This presentation and the frequently asked questions will be posted to our website by the close of business tomorrow for anyone that would like those copies. Thank you very much and have a good night.